Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Diane Allen, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action.
Hey, everybody. It's Diane here at Someone Gets Me, and I have Jason Forrest with me. He is a leader in the consulting, sales, personal development industry like no other. And he's coming to us from Texas to help us with how to overcome overwhelm and mental limitations. Because one of the things he's known for is helping people drop those limitations instead of buying into the limitations that are taught just about everywhere else. So Jason so graciously is giving us his time and his expertise to help us get out of overwhelm and undo limitations. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. And I really love this topic about limitations, especially mentally, because I do a lot of that work myself. And I notice it, how sometimes those little voices chatter in our heads and maybe we don't even want them to be there. So let's start a little bit with how did you get excited about this kind of topic of challenging those mental limitations? Like, give us a little backstory of Jason and how you got here.
Yeah. So I mean, very quickly, I've always been in the personal development space. Growing up, I was very fortunate that both my parents were very into personal development. Some of the legends of Earl Nightingale and Zig Ziglar and Silva mind control. And so I was always into all that stuff and kind of around it. And I was very fortunate I had parents that supported me and used those philosophies on me to make my life better. And so as I became successful in my own life, I just was really struggling on, it seems very easy to be successful. And it seems very easy to be rich. And it seems very easy to accomplish your goals in life. And so I just really struggled with, why is it not easy for everyone? And what's stopping people from people achieving what they want in life? And so I just became very kind of focused on that. And so that really led to who we are today. The Forrest Performance Group is specifically in the sales area, but everything that we teach can be applied to anything in life. Can be applied to a leader that's not accomplishing their goals, or a parent, or that's the number one compliment that we get from our clients, is that what they learned from us taught them how to be a better mother or friend or coworker, even though we were teaching them how to get unstuck when it came to some sort of selling philosophy.
And that's really powerful because it's transferable everywhere in our lives, and for somebody to have that aha, that yes, it's a universal truth. And where we apply it can be individual. So what would you say is the number one thing that gets people stuck? Like, how do they get stuck? Like, I hear you, people make it look like success is all easy and it's all easy, but it's not easy for everybody. So what have you determined, or what do you see the most of what gets people stuck?
Well, so I think the reason why people procrastinate is a few things. So number one is people are not clear on not just their goal, but what is their outcome. So goals and outcomes, I think, are very different. Yeah. So a goal might be, I want to buy a new house. Okay. Well, what's the outcome? What are you trying to accomplish with that new house? Well, what I'm trying to accomplish with that new house is I want a more kind of stable environment for my family. Okay. So one, we got to figure out what the goal is. Number two, we got to figure out what the outcome is. Number three is we have to understand the why. So the why must be greater than the sacrifice. So then there's some clarifying questions on, okay, well, tell me what's important to you about creating a stable environment for your family. And how would having that stable environment for your family improve your life? And what would that mean for you when it comes to other goals that you're trying to accomplish? Like, what does it really mean? What's the real purpose behind it? So that's the why. So number 3 is the why. Right. Number 4 is people aren't clear on the how. So the how, meaning the how is, okay, so what's your next step? What's your next step on accomplishing your goal? And I think people aren't clear. I think it's important for people to kind of chunk down their goal, their kind of action steps. And then number 5 is what is really just asking the question of, well, what stops you? Like what specific leashes, I call them leashes. And so a leash is any sort of story, self-image, reluctance, or rule that prevents you from taking action. But people don't have a leash until they have a goal, and they can't create an action unless they have a goal. And they definitely won't have a leash unless they're clear on the action. So they're all connected to it.
Right. And I hear from a lot of my clients, it's something that you kind of mentioned in the middle of that. And that is a whole part about chunking it down, that I see a lot of people procrastinate and get overwhelmed. And then all this stuff just jumps in because they get too big, too quick without realizing what's the next right thing to do. What's the next right thing to do? And they just see this big picture because I work with visionaries. And so they're way out there. And really the question is, well, what's next? And how are we going to get there? So when you run into somebody or you're working with somebody that has that kind of, they're almost shut down because there's just too much going on. They're either overwhelmed or they're overly fearful. What are some concrete things you would suggest for them to do to help kind of start to chunk things down?
Sure. So, I mean, really a practice like this would be very helpful. So, so let's just role play. So Diane, tell me, just be vulnerable with us right now. So tell me a problem or a frustration that you're currently having right now.
Well, the biggest frustration I have is I just moved and there's all these boxes I have to unpack, and I'm still running my business and have a life. And I keep looking at boxes and I don't want to look at boxes anymore.
Awesome.
It's my biggest issue.
So when thinking about these boxes and having to unpack, how does that make you feel?
Sometimes excited and sometimes kind of overwhelmed, like which box to start with and which room to start with. And so then when I get to that overwhelmed spot, I just don't do anything. I do something else. I work or write a book or something.
Understand. So in feeling the excitement and also overwhelmedness, how do you want to feel instead about unpacking?
I want to feel joyful and peaceful, and I want to have a flow all around me instead of this boxy stuff.
Perfect. So I want you to feel into joyful and peace. And while feeling into joyful and peace, tell me an action step that you can take to move towards joyful and peace. Just one little step.
Well, what popped in my head first is unpacking one box per day. Like just do one thing per day. Don't try to do all the boxes in one day or all the boxes in 2 days. Just take this one thing and clear that part out.
Perfect. So now I want you to continue feeling into joyful and peace. Mm-hmm. And while feeling into joyful and peace, tell me another action step, just a small action step, something little that you can take to move towards feeling joyful and peace.
I could focus on the joyful and peace, like that I can have joy and peace in the midst of the unpacking. I don't have to wait till it's the goal, till I'm there already.
Good. So let's do one more.
Okay.
So go back to the original feeling that you want to have.
Okay.
So feeling joyful and peace as it relates to unpacking. Mm-hmm. And while feeling joyful and peace, tell me another action step that you can move towards joyful and peace.
I can plant some plants in my garden and spend time outside because I have outside space that I want to make more beautiful and move into. And I can take time out there for my grounding and with my plants.
Perfect. So it sounds like, you got 3 action steps that I wrote down to move towards joyful and peace. And that's unboxing one box per day, to really find a way to kind of embody and be in the feeling of joyful and peace while unboxing, which I think we could explore even more. Like what are other things in your life that bring you joyful and peace? And then how can you merge that into the experience of unboxing? Maybe it's music and dancing, being free and feminine. And number 3 is to work on planting your garden, because it sounds like that brings you a lot of joyful and peace. And you said also grounding that can couple into it as well.
Right. I love my plants.
Perfect. So Diane, so how does that? That was a simple process. It was very quick.
Right. That is very simple. So what I'm curious about is, and I just had this conversation with a friend of mine, so I was so happy that I was interviewing you today, because we were talking about how the whole personal development industry, especially for us entrepreneurs and sales and marketing and running your business and all of that space, is really not geared toward self-care as much as we would like it to be sometimes. And there's all of these kind of harsh misnomers out there. And when I speak to you and I look at your content and I look at what you do, it seems to be much more like internal and personal that then radiates out. And as kind of like we get free from our own stuff. And so then it radiates out. So when somebody's stuck kind of in that, I want to call it kind of like they're being mean to themselves, like they're being really harsh, like that human doing instead of human being kind of mentality. What would you say to somebody who's kind of going, man, I'm just really being too hard on myself? And how could they start to turn the ship to be a little bit more on point, a little bit more generous with themselves, a little bit more self-care, and understand that they're more of a human than a machine?
Great question. Okay. So I don't know, this, I'm sure there are other people would have a different opinion than what I would have here. So but here's my philosophy. Number 1 is I don't, from a neuro-linguistic programming perspective. So that's one of my big backgrounds. My wife and I have over 1,000 hours master practitioner in NLP. So one of the NLP presuppositions, which is one of my models of the world, is that there's no such thing as an inner enemy.
Okay. Right.
So
I've studied neurosemantics a lot. So I'm with you on this.
So I'm going to go from that perspective. So from that model of the world, no such thing as an inner enemy. The second belief system is that behind every behavior is a positive intention.
Yes.
Okay. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is positive change always comes from adding more resources.
Yes.
So I'm just literally like reciting from memory the NLP presuppositions right now. So,
right.
So I think from that model of the world, the first thing I would do from a introspective perspective is to say, you know what, I'm not being hard on myself. The question is, what's my positive intention behind this?
Yes. Yes.
What's the learning behind this? What am I trying to, what's good about this? So here's another practice. Let's just keep going. So Diane, share with me something that you might be dealing with right now where you would consider maybe being hard on yourself.
Thinking that everything should just still be on the same pace, even though I just moved. Like I've given myself very little transition time. Got it.
So everything should be on the same page.
The same pace as I was doing before the move, kind of like, so it doesn't matter that you're unpacking and you have to figure out where everything is. Just keep on going and keep performing at that same rhythm without any transition time. Like us gifted people, we do that. It's like transitions are tricky. So we just compress it. And that's where I have to really watch my expectations of myself, because I'll say, okay, well, we should do like 5 interviews and do this and do that, when really maybe it's more beneficial to say, hold on a minute. Let's slow that down for a couple of weeks and then see how the new space feels and kind of live in it to then have it emerge the way I want.
Got it. Okay. So let's stay with that for a second. So right now we're going to feel into this kind of belief system, this statement that, you really want everything to get back to the same pace as it was before the move. And while feeling into, I want everything to get back on the same pace before the move, tell me something that's bad about that.
There really isn't anything bad about that. It's actually quite exciting.
Well, there could be, though. So what could be something that's bad about that?
Well, I don't really identify with it, but possibly it could be that there's a better pace waiting for me, that if I'm open to new possibilities in the new space, there might be a different way or a new way that's even more fulfilling and more joyful if I would allow the space for it versus just go right on the old way and pretend like that's the highest iteration, because I don't think it is. Good.
So let's go back to the original thought that you had of, you really want to get back on the same pace before the move, and feeling into that thought. Tell me something that's good about that belief, about that thought, that goal.
That I'm a servant leader and I love serving, and it brings me joy. Like, that's my whole purpose in life. And so when I get to be in that flow and in that space, it's the ultimate high for me. It's like, there's nothing that brings me more joy than that. So it's like, how much downtime? I really don't want a lot of downtime. I want to be out there doing and serving and being in a powerful manner. So that is always top of my list.
Good. So go back to the original problem that you had of getting back on the same page before the move, and tell me if there's something hidden, suppressed, or buried about that.
Well, probably a little bit is that if I actually objectively look at the pace before I moved, it wasn't totally satisfying. That it's almost like a euphoric recall. I want to be on that pace because it was good, because no pace isn't great. But what if the new situation is much better? And so then I just go to that, like, okay, well, we're creating something even cooler, because I'm not so sure the old pace was as wonderful and fulfilling as I will feel moving forward.
Good. Okay. So let's take that new element that you just responded to. And that is, what if the new situation, the new pace is much better? Mm-hmm. So feel into that and tell me something bad about it.
I can't identify anything bad about it right this moment.
It could be.
There could be something, but right now, when I feel into that, I feel a lot of excitement. I feel thrill, actually. Thrill would be the word.
Okay. And when you feel into this statement of, the new situation could be way much better, tell me something good about that.
That I've opened myself up to tons of possibilities, and putting myself in a totally different environment that's geeky and artistic and creative will just open up channels in me that were kind of suppressed before, that I probably don't even have awareness of yet.
Good. Okay. One last one. If you feel back into what you had said for a second ago, and that is, what if this new situation is much better? Is there anything hidden, buried, or suppressed about that?
That I'm an introvert. And so sometimes I wonder if it's a little tricky. Like, okay, you're an introvert, so you're going to go out there and meet all these new people and do all these things. But then I'm an introvert. Like, I go back and forth, got really excited. But I don't know if my introvert self is going to stop me. No, probably not. But it's like, I have that going on sometimes.
Got it. Good. Okay. So there you go. So that's another process, right? Of another process that I was trying to take you through, of starting with, some sort of kind of an inner conflict that you have right now, and then just taking through kind of this journey of, what's good about that? What's bad about that? What's arising in that? What's hidden, buried, or suppressed with that? And then through that journey of figuring that out, well, what now new thing is arising? So what's good about that? What's bad about that? And then kind of going through, that process. But I mean, the original question you have is, when it comes to self-work, I just think the answer needs to be, people need to realize there's no such thing as an inner enemy, and there's something that's arising in them. And I think the question is, what's causing it to arise, and what is my instinct saying out of this? What's my soul saying out of this? And what's good about this? What can I learn from this? What's coming from this?
Right. So like what's trying to emerge often, and that's at least in my belief system that has a lot of neurosemantics in it, is that what's trying to emerge is something beautiful, even if we don't really know what it is. It's something higher consciousness, something beautiful is trying to emerge. So we need to give ourselves a chance to say yes to that and see what it might be and let our curiosity help us out here. That's kind of how I look at it.
Sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So it's like, it's listening to our heart versus our head, you know?
Yes. Yes. Our heart and our gut versus our head. Let the head be the great supporting actor, but it does not get to drive the bus. Because when it drives the bus, we drive off cliffs. It's not pretty.
I love that. I love that.
I always have the image of some old like hippie bus with the flowers painted all over it and stuff. And it keeps going in the ditch if you give your intellect the wheel. So it gets to sit in the back seat watching DVDs while the heart and the soul drive and navigate. And it works out much better that way.
I love that.
So tell us a little bit about what you like to do for fun.
I mean, what's interesting is I really do. I know that sounds nuts, but I mean, I personally am one of the fortunate ones that, I mean, I like going to conferences and learning new things. And, you know, that is kind of fun for me. I think golf is, I think people play golf for two reasons. Number one is because they don't have enough important stuff to do in their life. Or number two is they're trying to get away from their wife. I think those are the two reasons. So I don't play golf because I like my wife. I love my wife and have a lot of important things to do in my life. So, I mean, as far as that, I mean, besides that, I would say just spend time with family and we have 3 kids and my wife is also the president of the company. And so we're pretty 24/7 together. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
How old are your kids?
Oh gosh. 13, 11, and 10.
Ooh, those are great ages.
They are great ages.
Yes.
They're finally somewhat self-sufficient,
right?
Which is great.
And you and your wife are going, yes.
Yes. They're finally somewhat self-sufficient, mostly self-sufficient.
So being a husband and a dad and having 3 kids and a very successful business, how do you decompress? How do you take care of the stress in your world? What do you do to get the stress out of your system?
Well, I do like working out a lot. So I think the working out helps. Right now, Mary and I are on this 75-day challenge that you probably see all over Instagram. So, right. You know, I don't know. It's so funny because people, you know, it's so funny how they get leashed on things like, well, that's just a fad. Why would you do that? I'm like, it's still effective. I mean, it's still just something to do. It's something you might need. You always need to have reason to be healthy, you know? So maybe it's a fad. Maybe I do it 75 days, but hey, I'm doing it. Right. So we're doing that, you know, and that's helpful. I mean, I think one of the practices we have now is we do 2 45-minute kind of workouts. Well, one of them is just a walk at the end of every day. And so that's been great just to kind of walk and decompress every day, usually after dinner. And then I also process myself. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of psychologists or coaches, life improvement coaches, whatever we call ourselves these days, but I don't think they process themselves enough.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of self-processing. I try to, my goal is to process myself every day, 1 process a day. So something like, for example, what I just took you through, like those are 2 different versions of processes, but just to even do that on my own self, you know?
Right. When I took my neurosemantic training, and that's what was one of the things that we all did, is do 1 process with yourself every day.
Yep.
Do something to keep growing. And I'm a geek for learning too. Like if there's a conference to go to or something for me to go learn, I'm the first one there signing up to go learn whatever it is. Even if I already know the topic, there will be something, there will be that nugget that will do an additional aha. And so I think open-mindedness is real important.
It is. Yeah. Just having that learner's mind, you know, is so important. I think I talk about this in my latest book is called The Mindset of a Sales Warrior. And it's where I go into these mental strategies that people have, the mental leashes, the self-image stories, reluctances, and rules. And I think it's important to let go of sometimes your limiting beliefs or rules that people have. And so that's a big thing that I think is important, So like, for example, like here's a good exercise people can do right now is the quality of your life is equal to the amount of rules that you have. So just download right now, like get on Google and just Google Wheel of Life, right? So there's plenty of little free PDFs on Wheel of Life, and go through and shade in the areas of your happiness, when it comes to health and family and financials and all the different things, right? Faith. And then once you look at the shading in, obviously the bigger the shade, the more happier you are. Well, then ask yourself in each area on a scale of 1 to 10, how many rules do you have in each area? Mm-hmm. So for example, like list out, like, I know I'm healthy when, I know I'm attractive when, I know God loves me when, I know my wife loves me when, my kids love me when, I know I'm successful at work when. So list out all the rules. And I guarantee you the area that you are most happy in is the area you have the least amount of rules.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's a good place for everyone to start, is figure that out. And then go, well, that's an interesting discovery. And then what's caused me to have all these rules in this one area? Like someone might, when it comes to their health, they might have very little rules. But then when it comes to their religion, you say, well, how do I know God loves me? And they've got like 1,000 different ways that they have to do before they prove themselves that God loves me. Well, you're not very happy when it comes to your faith.
Well, right. Because you have all these rules that you probably picked up along the way. You don't even realize you have, that are just kind of operating, that are holding you back, because really we're meant to keep expanding and emerging and growing. And we can't grow if we have all these tethers. You call them leashes. I call them tethers. Same thing, right? Can't have that happen. It doesn't work that way. We're supposed to be more free and more focused on involving and evolving.
Love that.
So what's your most memorable food you've ever eaten?
That is a weird question. Diane, where should you come up with that one? My most memorable food.
Memorable now. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It can be memorable for any reason. Just when you think about all the food that you've eaten and all your travels and all your experiences.
I mean, something that's coming up right now is Mary and I went to Paris a few years ago. And we went, and it was more of an experience, but we went to this restaurant that there was like a DJ that was playing like during the eating experience. You couldn't even hear yourself, but everyone's just like table dancing, looking at each other while you're eating. So you cannot have a conversation. It's so loud, but you're just eating amazing food and just table dancing and looking at each other.
All right. Like you can't forget that one.
No. So that was memorable. I don't remember what the food, I mean, the food was great. I remember the food being great. I just don't remember anything about it.
But it was good.
But it was good enough to remember it wasn't bad. Yeah.
I love it. I love all the different experiences because I interview people who've traveled all over the world and have all these different things. So I typically ask that question frequently, because I'm like, we all have our different autobiographies and things we sort for of what we're going to remember, what we're not going to remember, and those kinds of things. So I want to remind you, if you're listening to what Jason's talking about and you're resonating with him, to check the show notes, because you can follow him and find him there. It's easy to find him if you Google search him, because he is well known. And his book, though it's targeted for salespeople, as you heard in the beginning of this interview, applies to any life area. So I make a habit of reading these kinds of cool books, even if it's not like, I'm not looking to do more sales, but I am looking to keep growing. So be open-minded and check out the information that you're hearing about, because there's a lot of value in it. There's no way we could cover all of Jason's expertise and value in this one interview. I'd have to hold him hostage for a week. It wouldn't work any longer. So I have a couple more questions for you, and they're kind of personal and they're kind of business related, because I really love for people who are listening to know that there is hope to get unstuck. So if somebody's listening to you and they're going, man, I wish I could get where he is. Like, I want to do something, but they're really like lost on step one. What would step one be to get unstuck for just the person who's like sitting there kind of almost in a malaise about it? Like, COVID's here, there's this obstacle, that obstacle, and they're probably saying all this stuff to themselves. and they're feeling kind of stuck because I keep getting emails about that from listeners. Like, how do I kind of get even the first little tiny bit of momentum going? And so what would be something that you might suggest for them to say, hey, give this a shot?
I think if I was, okay, so I'm going to go different directions. I would say one thing to do would be, what stops you from taking action? And I think that's one. And I really think you should go through the procrastination model that I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast when it came to, what is your goal? What is your outcome? What is your why? What is just one step you can take towards that? And then what's stopping you from doing that? So I think those are all kind of important questions people should be answering. But if people are really serious about it, I think it's totally worth the investment just to go immediately, like, call a coach.
Yeah. Call somebody who aligns with you. And I think that I like the combination answer. Go back to the beginning of the podcast or replay what you just heard. Ask yourself those questions. What's the goal? What's the outcome? What's going on? And be honest with yourself. You got to have some kind of honesty, self-honesty, to increase your awareness. But
I'll tell you right now, guys, I mean, everyone who's listening, I'm being real clear. I spend, I don't know, 30% of my annual income on personal development every year. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I first got into this business, this was back 15 years ago, I made $100,000 that year, and I spent $100,000 on a speaking coach. His name was Steve Siebold, and he taught me how to be $1 million professional speaker. And so how you're thinking, well, how did you make 100 and then spend 100? Well, I got a loan. But I'm just saying that year I spent 100% of my annual income on personal development because that's how important it was for me.
Right.
That's how important it was. And so, but I would say now I probably average about 30% of my income, and that's my income going up every year. So that means that I'm spending even more money. I mean, last year, Mary and I spent, I know this is going to sound nuts. Last year, we spent $250,000 on personal development last year.
Right.
That's not my business paying for that. That was me out of my own pocket paying for Mary and I to go through a 12-month immersion program, And so my point is, you don't need to pay that much. Just pay what you can pay and find a coach that you can afford at your current level. But just that level of accountability is so critical.
Right. Accountability and somebody who's walking the path with you. Because sometimes I think people get in that trap of, I have to do it alone. I have to get out of this myself. I can figure it out myself, to which I say, you wouldn't be asking the question now if you could figure it out yourself. You can't read a label from inside the jar. You have got to have another human being engaged with you on some level to support the growth, whatever that is, wherever we all are starting. So if you're stuck, find somebody that can help you get unstuck. You can contact Jason. You can contact me through this podcast, or you can contact lots of different people out there. There's a plethora of support and help. You have to raise your hand and ask. You have to ask, because otherwise people don't know that's something that you need. So I'm going to put links to everything in the show notes. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that I did not ask you about before I ask you our final question of the day?
Well, I mean, definitely, please connect with me on LinkedIn. And whenever you connect with me, send me a quick note that you heard me on this podcast, because I always like to know where the connections come from. So one, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm always sending out kind of crazy stuff on my LinkedIn feed. I use my LinkedIn feed as like what people did before me use blogs for. So I don't really blog, but I do have my random thoughts and new ideas on my LinkedIn feed. So that's definitely a place to connect with me. And then of course go to fpg.com and subscribe to our stuff. Definitely love to hear from you.
Right. So we'll put all those links in the show notes. That's an open invitation to continue your growth and development and get unstuck from somebody who lives it himself. So if you're not sure where to start, subscribe to those things and start following both of us, and you'll start learning. That's the way I see it anyway. So your final question, you ready?
I'm ready.
This is so fun. I'm so glad you're doing this. We're going to create a billboard that the entire world is going to see with your quote on it. What is on that billboard? I
mean, what's sad is it's not my quote, but the quote that I like a lot is that's coming up for some reason is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. We've heard that one so many times, but I use that quote. That applies to so many things. When you change the way you look at marriages, marriage change. You change the way you look at parenting. You change the way you look at selling. Change the way you look at personal development, coaching, accountability. Whatever thing that you're struggling with, you've got some sort of charge around. If you can change the way you look at it, then what you look at will change. And I think that's, I think Wayne Dyer is the one that made that quote really popular, but I think that's an important one.
That is a huge one. Very good. I like that one. And it's so very true. And it goes exactly what we're talking about getting outside of that overwhelm and limitations and procrastination and freeing ourselves from the bondage of things that a lot of people don't even realize they're in bondage to. They're just living in all those rules and all those things that they haven't really examined. So I want to thank you for being on the show with me today. What a blast. And I really appreciate you taking the time and offering some really valuable things for all the listeners. And it was fun role playing with you. In fact, it's funny because right as you suggested it, I thought I should get him to role play with me. That would be really fun. And then you said, let's role play. And I'm like, yes.
Well, that's the easiest way to demonstrate. Instead of just teaching it, I might as well just demonstrate it.
Right. I know, it's perfect. And so I just love how the synchronicities all work out in our favor. So again, Jason, thank you for being on the show. And thanks.
Thank you.
Remember, everybody, put your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star and you're here on purpose with a purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. And until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episode's, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.